My son was asleep on my chest when the truth arrived. Not with a fight, not with anything dramatic. Just a rectangle of blue light on a countertop, and 4 words that quietly took a wrecking ball to 19 years of my life. And the worst part? I almost didn't look. It was a Tuesday night in late October. Houston humidity still thick even after dark, the ceiling fan going, the television on some channel I wasn't watching. Dominic had finally gone still against my chest, 3 months old, his little fist clenched around the neckline of my shirt like he was anchoring himself to me. Yvonne was upstairs in the shower. I heard the pipes in the walls, heard the faint sound of her singing something I didn't recognize. She'd been showering late every night for about 6 weeks. Said the hot water helped her come down after work. I never questioned it. That was my first mistake, maybe. Or maybe my first mistake was trusting a person that completely. Her phone was on the kitchen counter beside the half-full formula bottle I'd been warming. When it lit up, I wasn't trying to read it. I just glanced over. The way you glance at anything that suddenly glows in a dark room. The preview sat there in white text against the screen. "How's our little soldier tonight?" The contact name was Conrad Ellison, her supervisor. Senior Vice President of Client Strategy at a logistics firm off Westheimer in the Galleria corridor. I'd met the man twice. Once at her company's Christmas event on a rooftop downtown, and once at the hospital the morning after Dominic was born, when he showed up with a gift basket and said something smooth about Dominic already having the eyes of a closer. I'd thought, typical polished Houston corporate guy, the kind who says absolutely instead of yes and treats every conversation like a soft pitch, the kind who wears Italian shoes to a hospital maternity ward. Our little soldier, not your baby, not little Dominic, ours. I sat completely still. The television kept talking behind me. Yvonne kept singing upstairs. Dominic breathed that slow, full-body sleep breath that only babies do, total surrender to the world. I picked up her phone. The thread opened to a blank screen. Completely deleted. Every message gone. And I want to tell you something that nobody warns you about when they talk about betrayal. The deletion hit me harder than the message itself. Because innocent people do not erase conversations. Innocent people leave texts on read for 3 weeks and have 14 unheard voicemails and forget their phones exist. Innocent people do not clean house. That blank screen wasn't an absence of evidence. It was a confession wearing silence as clothing. Upstairs, the shower shut off. I took 2 screenshots of what little I had, sent them to my own number, set her phone back exactly where it was, and stood up with Dominic still against my chest. My hands were shaking badly enough that I fumbled the formula bottle cap twice. That's the strange thing about shock. Your body keeps running its routines while your mind is sliding off a cliff. I finished warming the bottle. I stood in the yellow kitchen light under the hum of the refrigerator while the dishwasher ran its cycle and the old house settled around me. I fed my son, and somewhere in the middle of that I thought, this is still my kitchen. These are still my walls. Nothing has changed yet except that everything already had. Let me tell you who I am, because in a story like this, the kind of man you are matters. My name is Raymond Okafor. 52 years old. I own Okafor Mechanical Services out of Pearland, commercial, HVAC, industrial ventilation, some hospital and warehouse work. 3 vans, 11 employees when nobody calls in sick. I built the company from 1 truck in my driveway in my early 30s, working Houston summers in crawl spaces and equipment rooms while other people my age were climbing corporate ladders. My hands show it. My right shoulder shows it every morning in January when the Gulf Coast cold settles into old injuries. I'm not a man who expected a soft life. I just expected an honest one. Yvonne was 41. Smart and funny and the kind of attractive that has nothing to do with effort. She walked into rooms in a plain blouse and made people want to listen to her before she said a word. We'd spent almost 7 years trying for a baby. 7 years of fertility specialists at the Texas Medical Center, of injections and timed cycles and 2 IVF rounds that cost more than I want to remember. I gave her the injections myself on the nights her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat in waiting rooms with bad lighting reading the same Sports Illustrated twice because she needed one of us to look calm. When those cycles failed, I held her while she sobbed and told her she hadn't failed us, that her body hadn't betrayed her, that we would find another way. When Dominic was born 3 months before that night, I genuinely believed we had survived the hardest thing we would ever face together. I was wrong. Spectacularly, gutturally wrong. I knew who Conrad Ellison was beyond the gift basket and the polished shoes. I'd looked him up, the way a man does when he's curious and tells himself he's being casual. Big house in Memorial. Gray Range Rover. Active in various Houston business councils. The kind of professional reputation built on 20 years of making himself indispensable to people with money. I'd seen him speak to Yvonne at that Christmas party, familiar, unhurried, slightly proprietary. The way a man speaks to a woman he has already decided belongs in his world. I noticed it and I dismissed it because I was not that husband. I was not the suspicious man who made his wife's professional life about his own insecurities. I was regretting that now. I searched for Miriam Ellison on my phone. Her profile showed a woman in her late 40s standing near a lake somewhere, one of those faces that radiates competence and warmth simultaneously, the kind of person who runs the neighborhood holiday drive and shows up with labels already printed. I sat looking at her picture for a long time while Dominic slept heavier against my arm. I could still close this. I could put the phone down and give Yvonne a chance to explain. I could protect whatever version of our marriage still existed inside these four walls. Then the word ours came back to me like a sound in an empty room. I sent Miriam the screenshots. Underneath them, I typed 8 words. I think you need to see this. I'm sorry. Then I sat in the kitchen and waited. 26 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Yvonne called down from upstairs without coming down. Ray, can you get that? I walked to the front door. Each step felt displaced, like I was moving through someone else's house, playing a role in a scene I hadn't been given the script for. When I opened the door, a woman stood on the porch in a dark blazer and jeans, holding a laptop under one arm. Her eyes were red along the rims, but her jaw was set. She was breathing the controlled way people breathe when they are using every resource they have not to come apart in a stranger's doorway. We looked at each other for a full second. Miriam Ellison, she said quietly. I think we've been lied to by the same person. Behind me, upstairs, Yvonne started humming again. Come in, I said. She stepped inside carefully, the particular carefulness of a woman who wasn't sure how welcome she was in another woman's home. I led her back toward the kitchen. From upstairs, I heard dresser drawers opening and closing. Yvonne moving through our bedroom, completely unaware that the floor beneath her was already gone. Dominic started crying just as we reached the kitchen. That thin, tired, newborn cry that means nothing is specifically wrong, just that he is small and alive and needs the world to acknowledge it. Miriam looked at him immediately. And something about that moment, a woman with red eyes looking at my son in the middle of this wreckage, made the whole night suddenly, completely real. Can I warm that? She asked softly, nodding at the bottle on the counter. I handed it to her without a word. She warmed it while I bounced Dominic against my shoulder. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm chirped once and stopped. I honestly don't know what I expected from this moment when I was sitting there waiting for her to arrive. Some version of chaos, maybe. 2 devastated strangers in a kitchen at 11 o'clock at night ended up feeling quieter than anything else I'd experienced that week. I almost didn't come, Miriam said. But you did, I said. When someone sends you proof your husband might be sleeping with her, she handed me the warmed bottle. Our fingers grazed, both cold. You don't really sleep after that. I sat at the kitchen table and fed Dominic. Miriam set the laptop beside my placemat and opened it. I found more, she said. What you sent me was maybe 5% of it. I leaned back slowly. How much more? She gave a hollow, short laugh that contained no humor at all. A lot. She opened synced cloud messages, months of conversations I hadn't known existed. Hotel confirmations, inside jokes, receipts from restaurants I recognized. One message from Conrad. Tell my little champ I'll bring him a Texans jersey as soon as he can hold his head up. One from Yvonne back. Only if it's not from that terrible season. They had a whole shorthand. They had accumulated references and running jokes the way people do when they spend real time together. That was almost worse than the receipts. I want to stop here and be honest with you, because if you have ever sat at your own kitchen table at midnight and watched the entire parallel version of your life scroll past you on someone else's screen, you know this isn't a feeling that translates cleanly. It doesn't feel like anger, exactly. It doesn't feel exactly like grief. It feels like reaching for something completely solid and finding open air. Every memory you thought you owned suddenly has a question mark attached. Every night Yvonne came home tired. Every weekend conference she'd traveled for. Every long work dinner. All of it was now a document with 2 possible readings, and only one of them was the one I'd been living. There were hotel receipts in a separate folder. Miriam had organized them by date. I cross-referenced them automatically, the way your brain does when it's trying to survive pain by turning it into arithmetic. One date matched a conference Yvonne had told me was mandatory compliance training. Another date was 9 days after Dominic was born. 9 days. I closed my eyes. For exactly 3 seconds. That was around the time Yvonne was still recovering. The time I was doing 2 a.m. diaper changes alone in the dark, warming bottles in the kitchen in a t-shirt, whispering to my son in the blue quiet of a sleeping house because I didn't want to wake her. And this man had already found his way back into her phone, back into our days. "You okay?" Miriam asked carefully. "No," I said. "But I'm not going to do anything that ends me up in a police report." She almost smiled. The first time all night, she rubbed her forehead slowly. "I found out about 3 months ago. I've been trying to decide what to do since." I looked up. 3 months ago and you stayed?" The question came out harder than I meant it to. She didn't flinch. She looked around my kitchen at the photos on the refrigerator, Dominic's infant seat by the garage door, the breast pump drying on the dish rack. Then she said something that settled into me like a stone dropped into still water. "After 28 years with someone, leaving isn't only leaving. You leave routines. You leave the version of yourself that existed inside that life. You're grieving a future while you're still standing in it." I looked down at Dominic and understood her completely. She scrolled further. More messages, more patterns. Then one line that stopped my blood. "Raymond still tells everyone Dominic is his twin." I gripped the table edge until my knuckles ached. Miriam said quietly, "I'm sorry. Don't apologize for telling me the truth." Upstairs, footsteps crossed the bedroom floor. My pulse spiked. But the mattress creaked faintly, the house settled, and it went quiet again. She'd gone to bed. "There's one more thing," Miriam said. Of course there was. She hesitated. "Conrad moved roughly $10,000 from our investment account about 2 months ago. I'm almost certain I know where it went." I sat with that for a moment. Every carefully explained conference, every late meeting, every reimbursement check he'd mentioned it rearranged in my mind into a shape I didn't want to look at directly. And then the fear arrived. Not fear about Yvonne, fear about Dominic. Because once that particular thought enters your mind, our little soldier, you cannot put it back in the drawer where you found it. Miriam watched my face. "You're wondering if he's yours." I didn't answer. "For what it's worth," she said carefully, "I think Conrad believes he might be the father." I think he told her that. That sentence hit me like a closed fist in the ribs. I stood up and walked to the sink and turned on the cold water and stood there staring at my own reflection in the window against the dark Houston backyard. 52 years old, barefoot, in my own kitchen at midnight, wondering if my son had my blood. Miriam spoke carefully from the table. "So, what do you do now?" I stayed at the window for a long time. Then I turned around. "There is a baby asleep 10 feet from here," I said. "Until I know the truth, I am not burning a single thing down." She nodded like she'd done a similar calculation and understood every variable. She left around 1 in the morning. At the door, she paused like something needed to be said, then stopped. Because what do you say after a night like that? We had come to each other as complete strangers. We left as something harder to name than strangers, 2 people connected by a wound they didn't choose. I locked the door. I stood in the hallway for a long moment. Then I carried Dominic upstairs. Yvonne was asleep with one arm curled around my pillow. She looked peaceful the way only people who have been carrying secrets long enough to get comfortable with them can look. I stood in the dark holding my son. For a very long time. 3 days later, a plain padded envelope arrived, sandwiched between an Amazon box and a water filter delivery. Yvonne brought it in without looking at the label. "More parts?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. The lie came easily. I hated that. If you have ever had to perform normalcy while your interior world is in complete structural collapse, you understand the specific exhaustion of what came next. It is not dramatic. It does not feel like a film. It feels like running a full work shift with a torn muscle you keep moving because stopping means explaining why you stopped. I showed up to job sites. I approved invoices. I had a 40-minute phone call about permitting timelines on a warehouse cooling project near the ship channel, while internally, I was somewhere completely else. I missed a client callback for the first time in 6 years. I blamed the baby. That wasn't entirely untrue. Nights were the hardest. Yvonne still reached for me sometimes in the dark. 19 years of marriage builds a physical language your body still speaks even when your heart has gone quiet. Those moments nearly undid me more than anything else. One night, around 2 in the morning, Dominic started crying. I went down and warmed a bottle and sat in the rocking chair in the corner of the living room with no lights on, just the street light through the curtains and my son's face. And I cried. Not loudly, not theatrically, just quietly, steadily, with tears running down my face, while this small, absolutely trusting human looked up at me, and I thought, if this child is not mine, I do not know what I am made of. That thought terrified me more than any of the receipts, because it told me I already loved him without conditions, without proof. without anything other than the fact that he existed and he needed me. One Thursday, I came home early after a cancellation in Katy. Yvonne was on the back patio, speaking low and fast into her phone. I stopped inside the sliding door. I wasn't eavesdropping, I simply stopped breathing when I heard Conrad's name. "No, you listen to me," she said, voice sharp and controlled. "If Raymond finds out everything, we are both finished." "I cannot talk right now." She turned. Saw me. Panic crossed her face. Gone in an instant, replaced with something practiced. "Hey, you're home early." "Cancellation," I said. "That was Priya, work stuff." She said it too fast. I looked at her and nodded. And for the first time in 19 years, I knew with complete certainty that my wife was lying directly into my face. Not suspected it. Knew it. That knowledge landed quietly. No explosion. No confrontation. Just something inside me going still, the way a load-bearing wall goes still right before it fails. 3 days later, I was parked in the lot of a Whataburger off I-10 West, with the engine running and the heat on because Houston November is deceptive, warm in the day, cold at night, and cold enough at night to remind you it can reach you. My hand shook opening the envelope. A country station was playing on the radio. Grease smell from the exhaust fan. A teenager in a red uniform glanced at my running van from across the lot with that particular adolescent detachment that means everything and notices nothing. Probability of paternity. 99.97%. I read it again. Then I read it a third time. Then I put my forehead against the steering wheel and I sobbed. Completely. Loudly. For a long time. In a fast food parking lot off the interstate in Houston, Texas. In a service van that smelled like refrigerant and old coffee. Dominic was mine. The relief arrived first. Total, oceanic relief. The kind that moves through your whole body in a wave and temporarily displaces everything else. He was mine. He looked like me because he was mine. Every instinct I'd had since the delivery room was correct. Then the anger arrived. Because Yvonne had done all of this, had let all of this exist, and had still let me spend 10 days wondering whether my son belonged to another man. She sat with me through those nights. She watched me warming bottles in the dark. She said, "You're such a good dad," Ray, while holding all of it behind her eyes. That is the thing about betrayal at 50 that nobody prepares you for. It is not only what they did, it is every moment they watched you suffer and chose silence over you. I called Miriam from the parking lot. She answered on the second ring. "He's mine," I said. A long, shaky exhale on her end. "Thank God." I laughed. "The bitter kind? The kind that comes out sideways?" "Yeah." She paused. "Then, I have to tell you something. Conrad's expense accounts are being audited. Informal review for now. But it's moving." "How sloppy is he getting?" 3 days ago, she said, he sent a voice message that was meant for her to a group chat with 6 of his direct reports. They all heard him call her darling. For the first time in weeks, something loosened in my chest, just slightly. 1 week from Saturday, Miriam texted, Conrad would be receiving a Leadership Recognition Award at the Greater Houston Commerce Foundation dinner at the Post Oak Hotel. Auditors would be present for a separate matter. She thought I should be there. I almost didn't go. Twice. The first time was sitting in my office above the garage, looking at the crew schedule for the following week, calculating what it would cost emotionally to walk into a room where Yvonne would be standing beside that man in formal wear being congratulated. Real life does not pause for dramatic moments. The truck needed new tires. One of my guys had requested time off for his daughter's quinceañera. Dominic had been up most of the previous night. Betrayal does not pause your responsibilities. It piles directly on top of them. "Still coming Saturday?" Miriam texted. I stared at the message. Then I thought about a Whataburger parking lot and a steering wheel and an envelope. "Yeah," I sent back. That Saturday evening, Yvonne came downstairs around 6:30 in a dark green dress I hadn't seen before. Elegant without trying. Her natural hair pinned up the way she wore it when she felt confident. For one dangerous second, she looked exactly like the woman I'd married at 33. "You sure you don't want to come?" she asked, fastening an earring. "Spouses are welcome." I was wiping Dominic's hands with a burp cloth. "Somebody has to stay with this little man." She smiled softly, then looked at me more carefully. "You've been somewhere else lately, Ray." I looked up. "I'm tired, Yvonne. That's all it is." "Is it?" She held my gaze for a moment, and for half a second, I wondered if she already knew that I knew. If somewhere beneath both our performances, we were each waiting for the other one to break first. Then she kissed the top of Dominic's head, then mine. "Don't stay up too late," she said. The front door closed. I stared at it. Then I looked down at Dominic chewing a rubber giraffe on the playmat. Something settled. I had Dominic over at my cousin's place by 7, and I was on the Southwest Freeway heading toward the Galleria by 7:20 in the rain. The Post Oak Ballroom was everything I expected. Soft lighting, soft jazz, people in formal wear, holding champagne, and having conversations that were actually auditions. Marble floors that made footsteps echo, the particular social performance of Houston wealth. Easy confidence on the surface, calculation running underneath. I found Miriam near the registration tables. She looked steadier than the night she'd stood on my porch, still tired around the eyes, but composed. "You came," she said. "You okay?" I asked. "No," she said. "Good." "Me neither." And then I saw them, across the room, near the bar. Yvonne beside Conrad, laughing at something a third person had said, her posture completely relaxed, the particular ease of a person who feels genuinely at home somewhere. And that not the receipts, not the hotel confirmations, not any of it that hit me the hardest. She looked at home beside him. Conrad's hand drifted to the small of her back and rested there like he owned the address. Miriam watched me. "You don't have to do this tonight." I thought about a steering wheel and an envelope, and 10 days of warming bottles in the dark, not knowing if I was anybody's father. "Yes," I said. "I do." Around 8:30, Conrad noticed us. I watched the composure flicker a half-second crack, seamlessly sealed. He excused himself from their group and walked over with a whiskey glass and the unhurried ease of a man who has never lost a room. "Raymond," he said. "Didn't realize you were on the guest list." "Last-minute decision," I said. Yvonne had gone still. His eyes moved between Miriam and me, running calculations. "What exactly is this?" "A conversation," I said. He suggested somewhere private. Of course he did. He led us to a hallway near the elevator bank, away from the ballroom noise, where the catering staff moved in and out through a side door, and the soft jazz became a murmur. The second the crowd noise dropped behind us, his entire register changed. "Whatever you think you know," he started. "I know," I said. "And I have documentation." That stopped him. I watched him recalibrate a brief internal negotiation visible only in his eyes. Then he said the sentence that ended any remaining complexity I'd been extending to him. "Name a number," he said quietly. "Whatever figure makes this manageable." I blinked slowly. "Excuse me. Messy situations damage everyone in them," he said. Smooth, certain, like he was offering me a contract addendum rather than a bribe for my silence about my own marriage. "Let's find something that works for all parties." I nodded slowly, like I was considering it. I reached into my coat pocket and pressed record. He kept talking. Specific now. A figure. Clean separation. Professional reputations protected. His voice low and precise, absolutely certain this was a language I spoke. He reached into his own jacket pocket for his phone, already moving toward the next step in the negotiation. Then footsteps came around the corner of the hallway. 2 people in lanyards, a man in his 50s with an accountant's posture and a woman carrying a folder. They moved with the specific, purposeful energy of people who have an agenda and a clock. "Mr. Ellison," the man said, not unpleasantly, "we were hoping to catch you this evening to discuss some reimbursement irregularities ahead of the end-of-quarter review." Nobody moved. Then Miriam stepped forward and placed a sealed envelope in the woman's hands. No speech, no announcement, just a calm, deliberate handoff that somehow felt more devastating than anything I could have scripted. The woman opened it partway. Hotel receipts. Printed messages. Bank transfer records with dates. I watched the exact moment Conrad Ellison's eyes shifted from management to survival. Yvonne had drifted toward the hallway entrance. She stood at the edge of it, arms wrapped around herself, eyes moving between Conrad and me, trying to read the geometry of a room that had already finished its work. Then Conrad made his final mistake. Cornered, recalculating, he gestured toward Yvonne without even looking at her and said, "She's a footnote. None of this is worth this kind of exposure. Whatever she told you, it's manageable." The hallway went silent. Yvonne looked like she'd been struck from behind. I reached into my coat pocket, drew out my phone, and pressed play. Conrad's own voice filled the hallway. "Name a number. Whatever figure makes this manageable." The female auditor looked at him over her folder. She said very quietly, "You've created the situation, Mr. Ellison. We'll need a formal meeting Monday morning." Conrad started to respond. She didn't look up from her notes. A hotel operations manager appeared 2 minutes later. No raised voices, no scene, just professional, controlled, absolutely devastating efficiency. Conrad Ellison walked out of that hallway flanked by 2 members of the hotel staff while the jazz piano player at the far end of the ballroom continued without missing a note, because that's what life actually does. It keeps going while yours stops. Miriam exhaled slowly beside me. I thought this would feel better, she admitted. Yeah, I said. Me too. I found Yvonne near the elevator bank. We rode down in silence, just the two of us, in the particular quiet of an elevator with tasteful music that makes grief feel lonelier than it actually is. Outside, the Houston night was cold and damp. She wrapped her arms around herself on the sidewalk. I never wanted it to go this far, she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment. Really? She cried. She told me it had started during the second IVF cycle, that she'd felt invisible, that he'd listened when she felt like I was only managing her. I listened to all of it. She wasn't wrong about some of it. I had pulled back during those years. I'd been so determined to be the calm one, the strong one, that I'd probably stopped letting her see me. That's the part I had to sit with afterward. In the months that followed, the part where betrayal doesn't exist in a vacuum, where both people have blind spots, even when only one of them made choices that destroyed everything. But I also thought about a woman who'd let me give her injections on nights her hands shook too badly to hold the needle. I'd sat in every waiting room. I'd been there for every result, good and devastating. I'd never made her feel alone through any of it, or at least I'd believe that completely. I became the last person in my own marriage to know what was happening inside it, I said. She covered her mouth. I think we need to separate, I said. She closed her eyes and nodded. A year later, the house sounds different, not empty, just rearranged. Dominic is 14 months now, and every other week this place is full of toy, trucks, and sweet potato on every surface and tiny sneakers that end up in rooms he hasn't been in yet. Then he goes back to Yvonne's townhouse in Sugarland, and the quiet returns. The refrigerator hum, the ceiling fan, the particular silence that builds in rooms where someone used to be. People don't talk enough about that part. Divorce after 50. You spend decades unconsciously organizing your life around another person's rhythms, their coffee, their television, the specific way they close cabinet doors. And then one evening you're reheating leftover food alone and the dishwasher running sounds almost like company. Some evenings were harder than I expected. I'm not too proud to say that. But on Saturday mornings, Dominic rides in the front of the shopping cart at Home Depot and points at ceiling fans like he's discovering something miraculous. Every single aisle, same reaction. It still makes me laugh every time without trying. The divorce stayed civil. Mediators. Shared calendars. 2 adults working carefully around a child who didn't ask for any of this. Yvonne moved into a townhouse and took a remote position with a smaller firm. Conrad lost his role within 4 months. The financial investigation expanded after 2 former colleagues came forward about separate expense manipulation. His professional reputation built over 20 years came apart piece by piece. The affair became almost a footnote, which, as Miriam once texted me months later, was probably what he deserved. Not to be remembered as someone who loved recklessly, but as someone who stole clean and got caught. Miriam moved to San Antonio to be close to her daughter. We still text occasionally. There is something specific about surviving a betrayal alongside someone and understanding that doesn't dissolve even after the anger is mostly gone. I started fishing again in the spring. Early Saturday mornings at Lake Conroe, old country music low through the truck speakers, Gulf Coast humidity just starting to build on the water. The first few trips felt lonely in a way I hadn't expected. Then gradually they started feeling peaceful. That surprised me. Healing doesn't arrive as a single moment. It accumulates. One decent morning, then another. Then one afternoon you go 4 hours without replaying any of it. And that feels enormous. Genuinely enormous. My cousin Loretta convinced me to attend a small Sunday group at our church, mostly people in their 40s and 50s navigating the aftermath of long relationships. Folding chairs, decent coffee, honest conversation. That's where I met Vanessa. 48 years old, middle school science teacher, divorced 3 years. She wore paint-stained sneakers to the first 4 meetings because she came straight from working on her back porch. She laughed with her whole face completely open, completely uncalculated. Nothing sudden about it. We talked, then texted, then had breakfast after service a couple of times. That pace felt exactly right. At our age, you stop needing fireworks. Kindness starts to look like the most attractive quality in any room. She asked me once, casually, whether I still resented Yvonne. I thought about it for a while. Not really, I said. Not anymore. What do you feel then? I looked out the diner window. Sadness, I think. Gratitude for some of the years. Disappointment that shifts depending on the day. She nodded like she'd navigated that same territory herself. She probably had. About 2 weeks before Dominic's first birthday, Yvonne came by to pick up his bag. Dominic chased our old Labrador through the living room with the single-minded dedication of someone who has a very important plan. She stood near the doorway watching them. Then she said quietly, "Thank you." I looked up from the counter. For what? For not making it worse than it had to be. That sat between us. And the truth is, I could have. There were moments where the damage could have been spread further, applied more precisely. I chose not to. Not for her. For Dominic. Because pain spreads. Humiliation spreads. Cruelty spreads. And at some point, someone has to decide to stop passing it forward. My son deserved at least one parent who wasn't still on fire. After she left, I sat on the living room floor and built block towers with Dominic while November rain tapped the windows. He knocked every single one over and laughed so hard he hiccuped. Sitting there at 52 in sweatpants, I understood something I hadn't expected to understand. My life hadn't ended. It had changed painfully, expensively, in ways I hadn't chosen, but it had continued. And some of what came after was genuinely good. Betrayal changes people. I know that now in ways I didn't know 2 years ago. Some of the damage stays tender for a long time, but people still get to decide what kind of person they become on the other side of it. That choice doesn't disappear just because everything else did. If someone broke your trust late in life, when you thought the hardest chapters were already behind you, I hope you found your way back to something solid. And if you're still inside the hard part, still trying to figure out which version of yourself survives this, I just want you to know you are probably not as alone in that as it feels tonight. Drop a 1 in the comments if you think Raymond made the right calls throughout this story. Drop a 2 if there's something you would have done differently. I genuinely want to hear it. Drop a 3 if this story hits somewhere personal for you. And tell me where you're watching from right now, and what time it is there. I always want to know who's on the other side of these stories. If you have ever loved someone completely and then had to quietly figure out who you are without them, this channel is for you. Subscribe if these stories speak to something real in your life. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Houston, Texas to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.